Yeah, that's right, kids. Billy Bragg and Wilco from an album from quite a few years back now, Mermaid Avenue. They're actually doing a Mermaid Avenue 3 as we speak. And that was Walt Whitman's niece. Whole bunch of songs, lyrics by Woody Guthrie, and then the music applied by Billy Bragg and Wilco. And of course, we're playing. Well, first of all, congratulations to Sean, who will be going out to see Alejandro Escovedo tomorrow night at the Stephen Talkhouse in Amagansett, and you should too. And that's all I got to say about it. Check out Stephen Talkhouse. That's STEPHEN Talkhouse.com and get some more information. I think there are still a few tickets left for Alejandro tomorrow night, and if you haven't seen Alejandro ever, do not miss it. And if you've seen him before, you know it's always a great show. So be sure you go out there and check it out east. Call in sick Thursday, whatever you got to do, and enjoy the show. I'll back you up. I'll write you a note, whatever you need. The 31st was Walt Whitman's birthday, May 31st. And, obviously that's fallen in between the last two shows. So we do this really cool thing every year, an annual event, the Whitman Fest. I like to call it, or it's the Wit-tastic event, whatever it may be. And we have with us, as always, poet, editor, all-around Renaissance man, Whitman fan, Mankh. Mankh, how are we?
We are good tonight. Thank you, Finn.
Oh, it's great to have you on board, as always. Obviously, we mention this on a yearly basis, but we kind of got going on this thing based on a book you edited and contributed to. Would you like to tell us a little about that book?
Yes, certainly. It's also published it. It's called Primal Sanities. It's a tribute to Walt Whitman with poetry and essay from mostly Long Islanders, but some others as well. And it came out of realizing that so many poets and writers on Long Island either have been influenced by Whitman or just love learning about him or write like him or something. And so, hey, it was time to put it together in a book. And the title comes from one of his poems where he says, "Give me again, O nature, your primal sanities." And I'd probably say this every year, but each year it seems even more important that we stay connected with these primal sanities as certain things get crazier and crazier.
Absolutely, and the times we're living in certainly need as much help as they can get, and Whitman can easily provide that for us, I think. So what, it's a tribute essentially to Whitman done by other writers, modern writers, and we usually have people reading from it, at least some selections from it every year. And did you want to expound or read on it a little bit right now?
Sure, we could start off with this is a piece by it's actually a translation by Jonathan Cohn of a well-known poet called Pedro Mir, who is obviously writes in Spanish. So I'll read John's translation, and then I'll read the Spanish. I'll give it a go. I did that one year. It went over pretty good.
Okay,
my high school training kicked in. This is from his piece Countersong to Walt Whitman. "Oh, Walt Whitman, your sensitive beard was a net in the wind. It throbbed and filled with ardent figures of sweethearts and youths, of brave souls and farmers, of country boys walking to creeks, of rowdies wearing spurs and maidens wearing smiles, of the hurried marches of numberless beings, of tresses or hats, and you went on, listening road after road, striking their heartstrings word after word. Oh, Walt Whitman of guileless beard, I have come through the years to your red blaze of fire." I just love that last line. It really really stays with me. All right, here's the Spanish for all the listeners. "Oh, Walt Whitman de barba sensitiva, era un red al viento, vibrada y se llenaba de encendidas figuras, de novia y doncellas, de bravos y labriegos, de rudos mozalbetes, camino del riachuelo, de guapos con espuelas y mozas con sonrisa, de marchas presurosas, de seres infinitos, de trenzas o sombreros. Y tú fuiste escuchado camino por camino, golpeándoles el pecho palabra con palabra. Oh, Walt Whitman de barba candorosa, alcanzo por los años tu ropa y amarrado.
Mankh, I was convinced. I was completely convinced.
I got to say something about Pedro Mir because he passed away in 2000, but he was the Dominican Republic's foremost literary figure of the 20th century. So it's quite an honor to have somebody like that. He was in exile at one point, and he returned 15 years later, and that's just some of his briefly his bio. So it's really an honor to have somebody like that.
Yeah, Whitman had a profound influence on writers, obviously, but and was very influenced on what was happening in the world around him. Can you tell us a little about, for those who do not know, tell us a little about Walt Whitman. Tell us a little about Walt Whitman.
Yeah, well, I'm not I'm not a big researcher historian on Whitman, but he was born in West Hills, where the Walt Whitman birthplace still is today. Which is
just, for those of you who don't know, just a little south of Huntington.
And he eventually, he went there in his journals. He goes around, walks around Long Island, however he got around, and he just explores the forest. He writes about the waters, and it sounded like he loved to meet people because he talks about meeting all the fishermen and. Whitman, he goes on and on and on. He was a printer at the age of 12. He learned the printer's trade. And he started a newspaper which is still around today called the Long Islander, the Long Islander. I think George Wallace still has a column in there called Walt's Corner, and he publishes a poem by a local writer.
And for those of you who don't know, George Wallace, former poet laureate of Suffolk County.
Yeah, he co-edited the book as well.
And co-edited the book, right.
And
among many other things.
He also worked for the Brooklyn newspaper, the Brooklyn Freeman. And then he supposedly, he went during the Civil War. He went and literally helped nurse the soldiers. So he did a lot of interesting things, and he eventually moved to a little house in Camden, New Jersey, where there's still I think his house is a museum or something like that.
Even Whitman can be forgiven for moving to New Jersey.
And he really was, like, people call him the father of modern poetry. I call him my uncle because I feel like I can relate with him as an uncle in that way. But whatever you call him, he really kind of busted open the poetic line, from more of the Romantic period and very tight rhyming certain sort of style, and he created this kind of almost breathless style that you still hear it today with lots of writers, and the beat poets. Some people think it comes from the beats. I think it comes farther back to Whitman.
Yeah, that kind of free verse style has a profound influence, and arguably the first truly American poet, certainly in terms of inventing a style that is indigenous to America.
Yeah, and he helped help make people aware of the word Palmanock, which is one of the native words for Long Island. Also, Sewan Hockey, I don't think he used that one, but he also referred to Manhattan as Mannahatta, another native word. So he's a strong link to the indigenous population, which is important, very important, especially on Long Island when all these towns are named after them, but yet how much do people know? That he was as much local as he was cosmic. He even refers to himself with a K as Cosmic Cosmos, Walt Whitman of the Cosmos. So he's just like the timeless kind of dude in his, really trippy poetry, and yet he's very nuts and bolts. So I think of him as holistic, because he covers the spiritual levels and he covers the very earthy. He covers everything, male, female. Sexuality. People say he was bisexual. Who knows exactly what
Who cares?
What he thought of himself? But his stuff is still rings true today. I think that's why he's still so popular. So many issues still going on.
And I think you touched on a good thing for the reader in general. There, he goes from everything from the matter of fact, mundane observations of life, not that they're mundane expressed by him, but the mundane events of life, to the spiritual. And he rides the whole gamut of expression and thought and feeling. And of course, his most his work, his biggest work of his life, obviously, Leaves of Grass. And Leaves of Grass, just a constantly evolving work. He,
it was his life.
Throughout his life.
Yeah.
It's one long, constant work, yeah.
Yeah, even one of the poems in there, I don't know if Robert Savino could make it tonight, but he has a line about his work, his life. Right. Was a constant revision, just over and over. He did not get such a favorable reviews at first. And even people, some famous writers, maybe even was Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson. That was, I think you should take out some of that, sexual stuff, because it was very risque at the time, and
sure.
It still is today in some regards. But he was, he stayed true to his leanings and said, no, this is what it's about. So
it's about the human experience.
And right. I think this is the 193rd birthday. So
wow.
He was he was born 1819. So.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a wow. Oh yeah, this is a new tidbit. I like to have at least one new tidbit every year. Somebody recently told me that the Chinese word for poetry is the two pictures word plus temple, which is beautiful in itself. But I was looking up the Chinese picture graph because I have a dictionary. I do the calligraphy, and the way it described temple was like the place where the grass grows, like the grass growing place. And of course, I thought, wow, that makes Leaves of Grass even more something or other. I don't know what. It's almost a speechless, speechless connection.
That's a beautiful imagery there.
Yeah.
So we have some readers and guests tonight, right?
Yeah, we have some. I don't know if some are in the anthology and some aren't, because they just love Whitman, and we've been doing enough years that it's like a rotating thing. So tonight we have our first timer. She's a very theatrical reader, and she's also a teacher. Her name's Barbara Branca. Welcome.
Hi, Barbara.
Thanks.
Yeah, we're good. We'll pick it up.
Sure. That's great.
Barbara, tell me a little about your background first. Tell me about yourself.
Well, I'm actually a science writer.
Science writer?
I'm a science writer, and I work right here on campus as the communications manager of New York Sea Grant, which is an agency that is funded by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and it's a partnership of the SUNY system and Cornell, and we sponsor research and education on all kinds of marine and coastal issues. But I'm also a performance poet, and we already mentioned George Wallace, the former Suffolk County Poet Laureate. I asked George to read some Whitman during our 40th anniversary of New York Sea Grant, and he chose to read Whitman's Poem of Joys because it's about the people that have their living from the sea, and it's very much in keeping with our New York Sea Grant mission to promote environmental stewardship and responsible use of our marine resources. So I'd like to read that tonight.
Sure, Barbara, go ahead.
Okay. First, I'm going to kind of bring the spirit of Pomonok. Poem of Joys. Oh, to have been brought up on bays, lagoons, creeks, or along the coast. Oh, to continue and be employed there all my life. Oh, the briny and damp smell, the shore, the salt weeds exposed at low water. The work of fishermen, the work of the eel fisher and the clam fisher. Oh, it is I come with my clam rake and spade. I come with my eel spear. Is the tide out? I join the group of clam diggers on the flats. I laugh and work with them. I joke at my work like a meddlesome young man. In winter, I take my eel basket and eel spear and travel out on foot on the ice. I have a small axe to cut holes in the ice. Or another time, in warm weather, out in a boat to lift the lobster pots where they are sunk with heavy stones. I know the boys. Oh, the sweetness of the 5th month morning upon the water as I row just before sunrise. I pull the wicker pots up slantingly. The dark green lobsters are desperate with their claws. As I take them out, I insert wooden pegs in the joints of their pincers. I go to all the places, one after another, and then row back to shore. There, a huge kettle of boiling water, the lobsters shall be boiled till their color becomes scarlet. Or another time, mackerel taking. Voracious, mad for the hook near the surface, they seem to fill the water for miles. Or another time, fishing for rockfish. I, one of the brown-faced crew, or another time trailing for bluefish off Palmanock. I stand with braced body. My left foot is on the gunwale. My right arm throws the coils of the slender rope. In sight around me, the quick veering and darting of 50 skiffs, my companions. Poem of Joys.
Barbara, that was beautiful.
So
Would you like to read something else?
I would like to read an abbreviated version of what's considered like the most ecological of Whitman's poems.
Tying to your science background.
Absolutely. And a lot of people know this one. And it's called This Compost. And I'd like to dedicate it to a former doctoral student from the School of Marine Sciences who passed away recently. That would be Nuria Protopopescu. This is for Nuria. This compost. Something startles me where I thought I was safest. I withdraw from the still woods I loved. I will not go on now on the pastures to walk. I will not strip the clothes from my body to meet my lover, the sea. I will not touch my flesh to the earth as to other flesh to renew me. Oh, how can it be that the ground itself does not sicken? How can you be alive, you growths of spring? How can you furnish health, you blood of herbs, roots, orchards, grain? Are they not continually putting distempered corpses within you? Is not every continent worked over and over with sour dead? Where have you disposed of their carcasses? Those drunkards and gluttons of so many generations, where have you drawn off all the foul liquid and meat? I do not see any of it upon you today, or perhaps I am deceived. I will run a furrow with my plow, I will press my spade through the sod and turn it up underneath. Behold this compost, behold it well. Perhaps every mite has once formed part of a sick person, yet behold, the grass of spring covers the prairies, the bean bursts noiselessly through the mold in the garden, the delicate spear of the onion pierces upward, the apple buds cluster together on the apple branches, the resurrection of the wheat appears with pale visage out of the graves. The tinge awakes over the willow tree and the mulberry tree. The he-birds carol mornings and evenings while the she-birds sit on their nests. The young of poultry break through the hatched eggs. The newborn of animals appear. The calf is dropped from the cow, the colt from the mare. Out of its little hill faithfully rise the potato's dark green leaves. Out of its hill rises the yellow maize stalk. The lilacs bloom in the dooryards.
Wow. Very nice.
And one final one, I'm just going to do a little piece of it because it has more to do with the ocean. As I ebbed with the ocean of life, as I wended the shores I know, as I walked where the ripples continually wash you, Palmanock, where they rustle up hoarse and sibilant, where the fierce old mother endlessly cries for her castaways, I, musing late in the afternoon day, gazing off southward, held by this electric self out of the pride of which I utter poems, was seized by the spirit that trails in the lines underfoot, the rim, the sediment that stands for all water and all land of the globe. Fascinated, my eyes revert from the south, dropped to follow those slender windrows, chaff, straw, splinters of wood, weeds, and the sea gluten, scum, scales from shining rocks, leaves of salt lettuce left by the tide, miles walking, the sound of breaking waves, the other side of me. Paumanok, there and then, as I thought the old thought of likeness, these you present to me, you fish-shaped island, as I wended the shores I know.
Fantastic. As we all know, Whitman, having spent lots and lots of time on Long Island, certainly references it many, many times in his work. Just very briefly, could you tell us a little about, just so people out there know, what Sea Grant actually does?
Sea Grant sponsors research and education programs that help us to understand all the processes along the coast, like erosion, water quality, what happens when the lobsters died off in Long Island Sound a decade ago, what happens to the clams on Great South Bay. Mm-hmm. So these research projects are then written about, and then we give that information to the clammers, to the managers. Those are the people who really need that information. So that's kind of the Sea Grant paradigm. Do the research, but it's practical. It has to do with the environment. It has to do with the seafood that we eat. It has to do with the water that we drink. And we try to give people the scientific information, mm-hmm. so that can be used to make really important decisions about how we can go forward on this small island with limited resources and a lot of people, and with a constantly changing environment due to climate change and so forth.
Other factors, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, there's climate change? Does that happen?
Yeah, I'm afraid
I just saw a documentary, something about standing out in out here in the fields or something. It was 3 short Long Island places. One was a farm, and one had to do with the clam, fishing, or what the right term is. But mm-hmm. That's interesting you mentioned that.
Yes.
Well, Barbara, thank you so much. How can people find out more about Sea Grant? Is there a website or anything?
Absolutely. You can go to NYSEAGRANT.org. And
Got
you'll
it.
find out what we do. And thank you so much
Barbara,
for having
thank you.
me here. And I will just...
shaking your rattle.
I'm shaking my rattle and saying goodbye to Walt. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barbara.
Enjoy the rest.
Great to meet you. Mankh, what's up next?
What's up next? Mindy's are gonna be coming in very shortly. Since we're mentioning the indigenous angle a fair amount, I want to plug a friend's radio show, which is on WBAI, which is in Manhattan.
Yeah, we've heard of that.
It's called First Voices Indigenous Radio, with the host is Tiogasin Ghost Horse. He's Lakota, and it's a wonderful show. He interviews people indigenous from around the world, and you really learn a lot about what is going on.
And when is it on? Do you happen to know?
It's on Thursday morning at, I think it's 9 a.m.
Okay. As long as it's not on Tuesday between 7 and 9.
No, it's archived too, so you can go online and listen anytime.
Very good. And you're speaking about the Native connections here. Just while we're waiting for Mindy to come in, want to talk about something else new that you may have just recently put out?
Oh yeah, earlier this year I published a book called The Unoccupy Movement, which is the Un is in parentheses, and the subtitle is Autonomy of Consciousness, Practical Solutions, Human Equality. What the title basically refers to is that people are familiar with the Occupy movement and that wave across the country and really around the world. But there's a lot not being said about from the indigenous and native perspective, which to a lot of the tribes and natives, this ever since Columbus showed up, this land has really been occupied. Mm-hmm. So from their angle, while the ones natives I've talked to, that while they agree with a lot of what's the being said, there's a different angle on it. It's not just to occupy, but to unoccupy. So it's kind of a Zen.
Exactly.
It's like a Zen conundrum. How do we do both of these, or how do we blend it so we can, make more people happy?
And once again, the website for Primal Sanities and also the Unoccupied Movement.
It's allbook-books.com. ALL.
All book.
Yeah, all book, one word, then hyphen, and then books with an S.com.
They can find out more. Okay, who's up next?
Mindy Kronenberg.
Well, hi, Mindy.
She publishes a book review little journal. It's called the Bookmark. It's a printout. I don't know how many years she's been doing it, but it's
at least half a century.
It's a wonderful thing. Book reviews
or it seems
are
like it.
hard to come by these days. But Mindy is also a teacher. And
yes,
an active poet on Long Island, so I'll let her tell you.
Mindy, it is wonderful to see you again.
Wonderful to see you, Finn. Wonderful to see you, Mankh, and everybody out there, and to celebrate Walt's natal day. My, how a year goes by so
Yes,
quickly.
right? It seems like maybe a week ago.
It seems like at least a week ago.
That's right.
But Mankh was mentioning a Bookmark, which is being put to bed this week, which has been around actually for 18 years, and some people listening, or any poet on Long Island, would probably know about Bookmark because we review small press and independent books, and of course we try to review a lot of poetry books. Mm-hmm. So we're a lot of local poets and national, and we have books from other countries as well. But it's a nice way to stay in touch with the burgeoning literary community of Long Island. And we actually we held 2 book fairs years ago in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I'm hoping to do that again.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, and to because people that I'm sure you know, Tammy Nuzzo Morgan from the North Sea poetry scene.
Sure.
I'm on the board for the Long Island Poetry Archival Center. We just had our year anniversary down there, and last weekend had a reading and barbecue. Okay. If you feed poets, they will come.
That's right.
Feed the muse, feed the tummy. And it was lovely. And when I think about it, what's interesting to me, and I know Mankh for many years, but the poetry community is it's a tight community. It's not an exclusive community. But when I'm in a room full of Long Island poets, I realize that I've known these people for 30, 35 years.
Right.
And after the initial shock of how old I am, I just start to, it's interesting to see people grow and to continue with their dedication to poetry throughout their lives, whatever it is that's happening to them. Because you know how life is, and it can be a very precarious thing. And you get to know people and see the changes and shifts, and we share our work. So over several decades, we see ourselves grow as artists. Mm-hmm. And that's a very nurturing thing, and I think it's a very inspiring thing. Mm-hmm. And that I know sometimes keeps me going when I get a little bit isolated in my thinking. And then we come on the air like we do now, and we share Walt's poetry, and we hear each other's poetry, and get together at the Long Island Poetry Archival Center and various venues. Walt Whitman birthplace in Huntington, and many other places. The Barn in Huntington. I'm giving plugs for all these people that I know. George Wallace. But if anybody's out there listening and wants to know, the poets.com email list, and Barb Myers has one as well. And if you just Google poetry on Long Island, you'll probably come up with half a dozen things. And events to go
that's
to.
nice that the community's happening, and there's always events. I'm in that loop actually of, when different events are happening very often. So it's a great thing to know. It's a great way to spend, even if you are not a poet, but just enjoy listening and experiencing people essentially reflecting the human experience. Right. It's a great way to spend an evening, an afternoon, whatever it may be.
Absolutely. And, I think that's a key element. I brought some things to read tonight, of course. A couple of my own things, something by Alan Plants, the late and missed Alan Plants, and a couple of things from Whitman that have to do with listening. I even tell my own students this, because I teach at SUNY Empire State College and for poets and writers and several other places. And I tell them, it's if you want to write, it's important to write, of course, and it's important to read if you want to write. But it's important to listen. Mm-hmm. And the literary community, the poetry community, needs readers and listeners. Not everybody's a practitioner.
Right.
But you need people in the community to appreciate the practitioners and to be able to listen and to read and to support poetry and to support literature, because these are the mirrors we hold up to our lives. And this talks about the human condition, and it talks about what we experience and what we think and feel. And so sometimes I think it's as important to have people out there who want to read the poetry, to listen to the poetry, to come to the readings, not simply to hear themselves, but to hear others. Very, very important to be a fan as well as a practitioner.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
And Whitman's certainly a great reflector of the human condition himself.
Oh, absolutely. And I heard while I was out in the waiting room listening about Whitman as the father of modern poetry, with his luxuriously long and ebullient and rigorous phrases, and as if his inspiration and his vigor knew no bounds.
Right.
And just to say it eloquently, and to embrace so many things. Where would you? I have, like I did last time. I know you're smiling. I have my old, beaten down, battered,
which is what I'm looking at, and we've referenced before. Yes.
Yes, the portable Walt Whitman. It's even worse than last year. You can see the tears in the pages, and the listeners can't see this, but I have just all of these little Post-it notes and things sticking out that I just don't take out. I just add new ones to passages that I'm always discovering, because Leaves of Grass is it's like the Bible. You just don't sit down and read the whole thing. You read it incrementally, and then you go back and you read new passages, and it has new meaning for you as you go through your life. Exactly. And so and sometimes I don't even know where to stop. I was thinking in terms of what to read for tonight. And I have favorite passages, but then I have a couple of new things, two of which have to do with listening. But I thought I would start off kind of a plug for Mankh's anthology, Primal Sanities, which never goes out of date. It's never obsolete. I'm sure he still has copies to sell. And it is an anthology, as you probably mentioned, of poems and essays as an homage to Whitman. And the poem that I wrote and that was published, which is called In All Things, was inspired by Whitman and other poets and experiences in my life, but in particular this passage from A Song of Myself. So I'll read a small passage and then read the poem. So you see the connection. All truths wait in all things. They neither hasten their own delivery nor resist it. They do not need the obstetric forceps of the surgeon. The insignificant is as big to me as any. What is less or more than a touch? Logic and sermons never convince. The damp of the night drives deeper into my soul. And here's the poem, In All Things. All truths wait in all things. That was Walt Whitman. Holding your weathered covers in my hand, I await the greatness that arises from words, a handful of beads broken from their leash, sprawled on the page to glitter in my sight. How you unraveled the benediction of the damp in the night, what surges and seethes beneath conventional speech. I collect your words like shells sprawled on a deserted beach, coins fallen from pockets to clatter on stone. I follow their pattern like leaves strewn on a furry lawn, the small pointed palms and stems caught mid-dance on the blades. I followed the footprints in sand and grass, witnessed the beautiful bathing young men, the curious spinster, the pensive old soldier, the black horseman resting his reins in the shade. I feel the swell and sway of your voice in the raucous chatter of birds, the wood drake and the mockingbird, the goose and the wood duck, rousing the winged spirit from within. Even in those moments when the world's pockets seemed empty and bereft of gifts, I held your tattered text in my hands, opened the split binding to wherever the heft of pages found me, and knew, in the alchemy of your poems, I would find all things, my private treasure, and I would never feel alone.
Beautiful.
Thank you. I think in some ways we feel that about poetry, that when you're writing it, when you're reading it, you don't feel alone. Mm-hmm. Somehow your feelings and the ideas that come from words accompany you. Mm-hmm. And it's not simply a reflection, but it puts you in touch with things. And, of course, it puts you in touch with other people. In my tattered text, as I referenced, which is falling apart in my hands as I speak.
And it is. I'm a witness.
And it is. He's a witness. I wanted to read, if you may indulge me, some of Whitman's work, much of which has to do with his love of people, his love of life, the sharing of these feelings, this kind of embrace he has. Every kind for itself and its own, for me, mine male and female, for me all that have been boys and that love women, for me the man that is proud and feels how it stings to be slighted, for me the sweetheart and the old maid, for me mothers and the mothers of mothers, for me lips that have smiled, eyes that have shed tears, for me children and the begetters of children. That was fairly inclusive. Let's see. I would like to read, I'll read the listening one afterwards. There's one that I'm so fond of, and I know I read it last time. But do we have time?
Sure.
I don't look like I'm getting up anyway, do I? I haven't strapped myself in, but I'm comfortable. From again, Leaves of Grass, Song of Myself, number 11, the presentation of someone who's looking and who's longing, and it has such tremendous empathy. I find it remarkably touching and beautiful. 28 young men bathed by the shore, 28 young men, and all so friendly. 28 years of womanly life, and all so lonesome. She owns the fine house by the rise of the bank. She hides handsome and richly dressed aft the blinds of the window. Which of the young men does she like the best? Ah, the homeliest of them is beautiful to her. Where are you off to, lady? For I see you, you splash in the water there, you stay stock still in your room. Dancing and laughing along the beach came the 29th bather. The rest did not see her, but she saw them and loved them. The beards of the young men glistened with wet. It ran from their long hair. Little streams passed all over their bodies. An unseen hand also passed over their bodies. It descended tremblingly from their temples, ribs. The young men float on their backs. Their white bellies swell to the sun. They do not ask who seizes fast to them. They do not know who puffs and declines with pendant and bending arch. They do not think whom they souse with spray. It's just, you could just see that happening, can't you? As she's watching.
Yeah.
You can feel the spray of the water.
It's tactile, yeah, sure.
It's tactile. You can see the glistening. And I'd like to close with these two sections. We were talking about listening, and poetry calls for listening. There's sound involved in the language. I tell my students, and I have to keep track of this myself when I'm writing, about the sound of the words and how the sound of the language can work with the content, can bring about feeling, can evoke things. But it is important to listen to each other, to listen to the world. I think I will do nothing for a long time but listen and accrue what I hear into myself and let sounds contribute toward me. I hear the bravuras of birds, the bustle of growing wheat, gossip of flames, clack of sticks cooking my meals. I hear the sound of the human voice, a sound I love. I hear all sounds as they are tuned to their uses. Sounds of the city and sounds out of the city. Sounds of the day and night. Talkative young ones to those that like them. The recitative of fish peddlers and fruit peddlers. The loud laugh of work people at their meals. The angry bass of disjointed friendship. The faint tones of the sick. The judge with hands tight to the desk, his shaky lips pronouncing a death sentence. The heave-ho of stevedores unlading ships by the wharves. The refrain of the anchor lifters. The ring of alarm bells, the cry of fire. The whir of swift streaking engines and horse carts with premonitory tinkles and colored lights. The stream whistle, the solid roll of the train of approaching cars. The slow march played at night at the head of the association. They go to guard some corpse. The flag tops are draped with black muslin. I hear the violoncello or man's heart complaint, and hear the keyed cornet or else the echo of sunset. I hear the chorus. It is a grand opera. This, indeed, is music. Which, of course, you only hear if you listen.
Well, that's the thing, is that it's sounds that some would consider abrasive sounds. However,
yes.
It's all the great cacophony of life.
Yes.
And it's quiet and it's noise.
Well, is art like life? Should art always be pleasing?
Exactly.
Should art be complacent and comfortable? Is art reflective of life? It is all music. You must take it all together.
Exactly.
And dissonances as part of of our existence and what we feel and experience as harmony.
Right.
Let's see. Well, let me go to this passage because, of course, Whitman talks about people, what they do, who they are, pulling them to his breast, as it were. He's a person. He was a poet who listened, who wanted us to listen to each other and to celebrate each other to an extent. And I like people. I like to be among people. Of course, I like to be among poets. But it is important when you're a writer, if you want to live fully, if you want to come to understand yourself and other human beings, you have to get to know them.
Oh, of course.
You have to live among them.
Correct. It's not an isolated experience.
It's not an isolated, perhaps when you're writing, although...
Actually in the act.
Actually in the act, although I have to tell you, I've written on buses and subways, and it's been noisy in my apartment on occasion. but one becomes secluded maybe in the practice, but you have to be out there in the world. I have perceived that to be with those I like is enough. To stop in company with the rest at evening is enough. To be surrounded by beautiful, curious, breathing, laughing flesh is enough. To pass among them, to touch anyone, to rest my arm ever so lightly around his or her neck for a moment. What is this, then? I do not ask any more delight. I swim in it as in a sea. There is something in staying close to men and women and looking on them and in the contact and odor of them that pleases the soul well. All things please the soul, but these please the soul well.
Beautiful, Mindy. Mindy, what's the website of the organization you're involved with?
With a bookmark?
Yeah.
We don't have our own website yet, but listeners can go onto the Council of Literary Magazines and Presses, CLMP.org, and we are one of the journal publisher members. I might also add that on June 17th at the Housing Works bookstore in Soho, CLMP is holding their magazine fair. So member publishers and editors will be down there with their books and their journals, and anyone who's interested in literature, who's a poet or a writer or an artist, should really go and get to meet the publishers, learn about new markets, and, of course, buy things to read.
And then get more information at clmp.org,
right,
where you'll be led to all different kinds of cool information. Mindy, thank you so much. We're going to take a very brief musical interlude. You are listening to WUSB Stony Brook. This is Finn's Revolution. This is Finn with you until the 9 p.m. hour. We are celebrating the great Walt Whitman. We'll be back in a moment. Yeah, kids, that's Dr. Robert. Dr. Robert, that's right. Not Dr. John, Dr. Robert, Dr. John's brother. It's What Happy Times, the Dreams of Walt Whitman. We are, my name is Finn, and this is Finn's Revolution until 9 p.m. We are celebrating some of the life and work of Walt Whitman this evening, and also sharing a lot of the works of other poets who have paying tribute, essentially, to Mr. Whitman. We're here with Mankh. Mankh, how are you?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Mankh has, of course, edited, along with George Wallace, an anthology of poetry. It's a tribute to Walt Whitman called Primal Sanities. And some great work in it by some local and not so local poets, and just great stuff. Just for those who are just tuning in, you want to just give us a little summation of what Primal Sanities is all about?
Yeah, it's a tribute book to Walt Whitman, so it's poetry and some essays, writers, either something Whitman that inspired them, or riffing off of Whitman's style, or just taking a theme, anything that, not just imitating him, but really paying tribute to him in all variety of styles of poetry and essays.
And it's a great book, and you can get more information on it at allbook-books.com. But it's also available via Amazon, but it's always nice to buy direct from the publisher. But Amazon.com also carries it, Primal Sanities. So go ahead, Mankh.
Oh, I was going to say the original, where the title comes from, is from a Whitman poem called Give Me the Splendid Silent Sun, which is actually, the first whole section is about nature and how wonderful nature is, which sometimes people over-stereotype Whitman as a nature, poet. But actually, the second stanza starts off, keep your splendid silent sun, keep your woods, O nature, and the quiet places by the woods. Keep your fields of clover and timothy and your cornfields and orchards. Keep the blossoming buckwheat fields where the 9th month bees hum. Give me faces and streets. Give me those phantoms incessant and endless along the I don't know that word, trotteurs.
You said it.
Trotteurs. I guess that's people walking down the street. Anyway, so Whitman celebrated Manhattan and all the people and the shore.
And he also lived in Brooklyn for a period of time.
And the line about the line where the title of the book comes from is, "Give me to warble spontaneous songs, recluse by myself, for my ears only. Give me solitude, give me nature, give me again, O nature, your primal sanities."
He had a way with words, that guy.
He sure did. Next up, we have another publisher, Kempton Von Hoff, who is publisher of Boonsdock Press. We started a few years ago. He can correct me if
2008.
in 08. Wow, he's been around a while now, and he's very ecologically conscious. Press. He had a poetry chapbook contest, which was won by a Russian author in Oregon named A. Malatkov, who will be visiting Long Island and doing some readings around here. So you can see that Kempton's got the publishing tentacles out there. He's also a professor at Hofstra, and I think I said he does a lot. His ecologically conscious press using
He's doubly conscious now.
recycled, and he's going to read. He's going to start off reading a poem in the anthology by George Wallace, since Kempton is not officially in the anthology. Welcome.
Kempton, great to see you again.
Likewise, thank you. This is called Song for Walt Whitman. It's by George Wallace. George seems to like it when I cover his work. He thinks I make the poems sexy. I imagine an empty stream of twilight spills mercy into the harbor of your lost children, just in time to watch the half-light of morning explode into American suns and harbor flowers, the hull of sky above your head crashing white as waves, or an unrealistic corona from Punkwag to Ellis Island to Camden, and all the forgotten stars twinkling capably forgotten stars, and gas lamps and expectations fueled with laws and blue ambition, Tiffany glass, street lights, traffic signals. You came with me, with your arms half open, walked out of a splintered clamshell of dreams, bearing a formula for the future world, never wondering what had to be discarded. The green song of a previous century, the last good war ended centuries ago, ever since the nation has suffered infestations, manifestations, and incantations, while the planet reeled drunk with its progress through the heaven. You have slept unconcernedly in a seedless noon, violated in the usual unswept hallway, while men with money scoured the land, strip-searched the soil, ransacked the farms in a birth forest, the rattling of great snakes, the grinning irrelevant movement of ferrets, while you walked casually with a sweet lumbering bear on the edge of a slumbering cliffside, while you stood by a chokecherry tree superimposed with unstoppable youth and ambition. Like you, I lit on the thumbs of the powerful, a naked white butterfly juggling my wings. Like you, an angel among dark birds, incredible, how simple to perch, perfect, straight and proud. Like you, a ray of the one true sun surged through the spring water with the power of being. Upwelling, I saw you standing by the morning harbor, a rising mist, the song of your buoys, the antique creak of your rudders, your wooden oars. I saw you in the immense morning, the satisfaction of you stirred out of your honest sleep. I saw you raise the jewel box of my expectations like a goblet toward an unrepentant heaven. Your heavy arms swung like a boom of peace, no direction, endless flow of lazy weather. I was never a sailor, but in that moment measuring the blue backwater of your imperfect wishes, the sun was a fickle, preoccupied god, ignoring the idiot nation. Your shadow lingered on the poisoned embankment of my days. Your beach roses blossomed in the throes of my rebirth. Your sea, your urchins, your waving red ribbons. Ah, the peninsular cries, ah, the human tide. We walked the beach once again together. We found love among intense empty beer cans and the sad fish hooks of capitalism. Sweet grace of you, yes, you, grace formed me skull and breath and shoulder to love you deeply, grace and the pressure of your adoration. Head first, two palms thrust into rough pebbled sand, the urgent salt, perfume of the wind. After your skin, tasting of tar and innocence and insanity, the empty kisses of your fortunate son, Walt Whitman, I bite down into the fleshy palm of your hand.
One of my favorites. Beautiful.
That is a pretty good one. It's fun. And then I'll do two sort of brief ones. These are both, in a way, after Walt. And if you ever stop by my press's Facebook page or website, it says something like a growing publishing endeavor from the island that proudly brought you Walt Whitman.
Wonderful.
So
a great touchstone.
So much of what I write is Whitmanian in spirit, if not necessarily in form. So this is called Human versus Nationalism, which Whitman certainly was. Often a human versus nationalism, and a human very much enthralled with the more savory aspects of nationalism. Mm-hmm. Here we have the terrorist, declubbed and unturbaned, working the blonde, could use Protestant ethics, could use a revival, could always use a tent or a refabricated factory. Out the cannery glass, shipped to the continent, meets this day's last bit of patriotism. Warm, in love with lanterns, industry's aesthetic, terrible weight of furniture, fabric, and this spear. They say that there are heroes who did not exist, who you and I will fail to betray, even in the last month that the last nation owns. Finite thought falls, as borders kill, falter, and decompose. And the second one is called Welcome Waltz and Williams, and it is essentially after and for Walt Whitman. And we can also dedicate it to anybody who goes by Walt or William, namely my father William, Walter Siller, William S. Burroughs,
Okay.
Whoever. Not Walt Disney. Anybody but Walt Disney, incidentally.
Very good.
Its grove evergreen, by the breakers and remnants of treasure, ocean bestowed gift of continuum of souls, the old and missing young, questing self in primordial soup transcontinental, thrown willfully into coast's transcendental wishes, threw us back to land, and our pirate fires ripped up the air, beckoning spirit to put out the war on the dirt and electric living rooms. We bring life and sea to its sand, back to a wooden cave propped up on diesel, hopped up on iron and labor and piracy, powered by oak flames that with blank walls keep brushstrokes doubly redoubled, hand upon the drum through to reddening east down every annual stair along drive with childhood potholes shell fixed ahead, baptism before the almost church, the moon, stars, oyster and pier, we greet here in spirit, day following fire, and work the first beam, touching, chilled, river, waking.
Kempton, wonderful. Tell us briefly how people can find out about your poetry.
People can find out about my poetry by Googling Kempton Von Hoff, and people can find out about Boonsdock Press by visiting boonsdockpress.com.
That's BOONS?
BOONES.
That's the question. Doc.com.
No affiliation with Boone's Farm?
It's almost like Boone's Farm, but it's Boone's Dock. It's a play on my middle name. My middle name is Boone, after Daniel Boone.
Okay.
And hence the name of the press.
Wonderful. So people should scope it out and check it out, because it's really beautiful, powerful stuff, Kempton.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Likewise.
Who do we have next?
Next up is Chris Nicola. He is not only a poet, he's actually a musician. He has his first CD done this year. It's excellent, really.
Do you have it with you?
He's got it with him.
Maybe we'll squeeze in a little before the end of the show.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's kind of, I don't know what, I like ambient music a lot, so it's nice, but it's not just ambient music.
Okay.
It's got a little bit of spoken
We'll
word
talk
in
a little about that too.
And Chris is also a visual artist as well. He's a budding Renaissance artist. Chris Nicola.
Chris, tell us a little about yourself. Where are you from?
I'm from Lake Grove. I'm actually in the process of moving out to Rocky Point, so it's been quite hectic. So I'm glad I've been able to make time to be here.
I'm happy you're here.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So you've been writing yourself, obviously.
Yes, I have, but past 3 years I've been writing poetry. I was a musician since 1998. I mean, I picked up my first guitar and I started writing in 2000 when I was 15.
Okay. All right, so you've been doing the music, you've been doing the writing. Would you like to read something for us today?
Yes, I would. That would be nice. I have some of a whole collection full of Whitman's works. So I have one here that kind of relates to being a musician, I guess. It's called The Mystic Trumpeter. Hark, some wild trumpeter, some strange musician, hovering unseen in air, vibrates capricious tunes tonight. I hear thee, trumpeter, listening alert, I catch thy notes, now pouring, whirling like a tempest round me, now low, subdued, now in the distance lost. Come nearer, bodiless one, happily in thee resounds, some dead composer, happily thy pensive life was filled with aspirations high, uniformed ideals, waves, oceans musical, chaotically surging, that now ecstatic ghost close to me bending, thy cornet echoing, pealing, gives out to no one's ears but mine, but freely gives to mine, that I may thee translate. Blow, trumpeter, free and clear, I follow thee, while at thy liquid prelude, glad, serene, the fretting world, the streets, the noisy hours of day would draw. A holy calm descends like dew upon me. I walk in cool, refreshing night the walks of paradise. I scent the grass, the moist air and the roses. Thy song expands my numbed, embonded spirit. Thou freest launchest me, floating and basking upon heaven's lake. Blow again, trumpeter, and for my sensuous eyes bring the old pageants, show the feudal world. What charm thy music works, thou makest pass before me. Ladies and cavaliers long dead, barons are in the castle halls. The troubadours are singing, armed knights go forth to redress wrongs, some in quest of the Holy Grail. I see the tournament. I see the contestants encased in heavy armor, seated on stately champing horses. I hear the shouts, the sounds of blows and smiting steel. I see the crusaders' tumultuous armies. Hark, how the cymbals clang. Lo, where the monks walk in advance, bearing the cross on high. Blow again, trumpeter, and for thy theme, take now the enclosing theme of all, the solvent and the setting. Love that is pulse of all, the sustenance and the pang. The heart of man and woman all for love. No other theme but love, knitting, enclosing, all diffusing love. Oh, how the immortal phantoms crowd around me. I see the vast alembic ever working. I see and know the flames that heat the world, the glow, the blush, the beating hearts of others, so blissfully happy some, and so silent, dark, and nigh to death. Love that is old the earth to lovers, love that mocks time and space, love that is day and night, love that is sun and moon and stars, love that is crimson, sumptuous, sick with perfume, no other words but words of love, no other thought but love. Blow again, trumpeter, conjure wars, alarms, swift to thy spell, a shuddering hum like distant thunder rolls. Lo, where the armed men hasten, lo, mid the clouds of dust, the glint of bayonets. I see the grime-faced cannoneers, I mark the rosy flash amid the smoke. I hear the cracking of the guns. No war alone, thy fearful music song, wild player, brings the every sight of fear, the deeds of ruthless brigands, rape and murder. I hear the cries for help. I see ships floundering at sea. I behold on deck and below deck the terrible tableaus. O trumpeter, methinks I am myself the instrument thou playest. Thou meltst my heart, my brain. Thou movest, drawest, changest them at will, and now thy sullen notes send darkness through me. Thou takest away all cheering light, all hope. I see the enslaved, the overthrown, the hurt, the oppressed of the whole earth. I feel the measureless shame and humiliation of my race. It becomes all mine. Mine, too, the revenges of humanity, the wrongs of ages, baffled feuds and hatreds. Utter defeat upon me weighs, all lost, the foe victorious. Yet mid the ruins pride colossal stands unshaken to the last. Endurance, resolution to thy last. Now, trumpeter, for thy close, vouchsafe a higher strain than any yet. Sing to my soul, renew its languishing faith and hope. Rouse up my slow belief, give me some vision of the future. Give me for once its prophecy and joy. O glad as sculpting, culminating song, of vigor more than earth's is in thy notes. March of victory, man is disenthralled, the conqueror at last. Hymns to the universal God from universal man, all joy. A reborn race appears, a perfect world, all joy. Women and men in wisdom, innocence, all health, all joy. Riotous laughing, bacchanals filled with joy. War, sorrow, suffering gone, the rank earth purged. Nothing but joy left, the ocean filled with joy, the atmosphere all joy. Joy, joy in freedom, worship, love. Joy in the ecstasy of life, enough to merely be, enough to breathe. Joy, joy, all over joy.
Beautiful.
That was 1872.
Yes, the guy was way ahead of his time. Let's just put it that way. Chris, thanks so much. We're going to, I think, listen to a little cut from your CD just before we get to another reader. Is there one you would recommend, Chris?
Sure, we'll go for that one. Heliopolis, that is.
That's my favorite one.
Okay.
That was my favorite one to work on, actually, on the album.
I may not be able to quite hear the whole thing, only for time interest, but we will keep it here and we will be playing it. Here's a little bit of Heliopolis from Chris Nicola from the album Novus Digester. And right here on WUSB Stony Brook, and we'll be right back with some more tribute to Mr. Whitman. Yeah, Chris Nicola doing, what's the name of this tune? Heliopolis on brand new record Novus Digester. Right here on WUSB Stony Brook, poet, artist, musician, etc. And we are in the midst of our Whitman celebration that we do every year, as May 31st would have been his 193rd? 193rd birthday. And Walt's been around. Let's say, and Walt is with us tonight, right here in the studio. Of course, you know this is not a visual medium exactly, but I got to tell you got to take my word for it.
Yes, Darrel Blaine Ford has spent many, many years. I think he's still traveling around, and he calls himself a personator, not impersonator, but a personator. And if you see him, you will know that he does look very much like Walt Whitman. And he knows, I've heard some of his stories. Goes way back to having stumbled upon the Walt Whitman birthplace as a teenager, was it?
No, I was 9 years old.
9. So this is the guy to talk to for history and tidbits about Whitman. And he was at the Camden house, I think last week, he told me.
Yeah, we'll talk a little about that.
Welcome, Darrel Blaine Ford.
Hi, Darrel. How are you?
Good evening, camarados.
Yes.
People say camarados. Is that Spanish or Italian or French? Or maybe spelled with a K, German. No, that's pure Walt Whitman. And since I invented the word, I get to define it. And I define it as we meet in friendship and mutual respect.
Very good, and welcome to the show.
Oh, it's good to be here again.
Tell us a little about your background as a Walt Whitman personator.
Well, it all began in 1939. I was 9 years old, and I decided that I was going to ride my bicycle from the South Shore of Long Island to the Long Island Sound and back. When you're 9, you don't do the math. That was 44 miles round trip, and was doomed to failure from the outset. But fortunately, I didn't know that. I got as far as the middle of the island, and I was exhausted, and I rode down into a pleasant valley, very secluded, very lonely, and I lay down on the side of the road. When I felt better, I happened to spy a little plaque that said, "This is the birthplace of the great American poet Walt Whitman." And I knew who he was because my mother, who was an Iowa schoolmarm, read poetry all the time and recited it to my siblings and I, and she did a wonderful, "Oh, Captain, my Captain, our fearful trip is done." Mm-hmm. And so I went and knocked on the door, and a very kind-faced, white-haired lady came to the door, and we chatted. And she took me into the house, which was then completely Victorian in decorations, plush rugs, and I remember being absolutely fascinated by all of the paintings and expensively framed photographs and heavy drapes, and particularly the legs of the furniture were all claws holding crystal balls. And she took me to the room where he was born, and we talked, and then she took me to the kitchen and she gave me a peanut butter sandwich and a glass of milk and a battered old coverless copy of Leaves of Grass, and I've been a Whitmaniac ever since. And that's something on the order of now 73 years.
Wow. That's a great story. And of course, that birthplace, for those of you who do not know, is in West Hills, just south of Huntington proper.
Most people locate it now by saying it's right across the street from the Walt Whitman Mall.
That's correct. And of course, very often we talk every year about the Walt Whitman Mall as a quick side discussion. And, I don't think everyone knows it's named the Walt Whitman Mall. However, if you do ever go to that mall, if you're in that vicinity, you will see all around the mall lines from Leaves of Grass into the walls of the mall itself. Most of us may walk by that not necessarily paying attention, but pay attention. It's there for a reason.
The mall now is being renovated, and there will be, if plans materialize, to have a very tall statue of Walt Whitman looking down benignly on the assembled shoppers.
Very good.
And I posed for the sculptor.
Oh, wow.
I do a lot of posing for art, for painters and people of that sort.
So we were discussing just before we went on air, what are some of the types of events that you actually do?
Well,
what kinds of things you go to?
I used to go to high schools a great deal, but they don't have any money now, which is a complaint that I hear often. But I still go to colleges and universities. I go to the home of Walt in the last decade or so of his life in Camden, right down near the Delaware River, so that he could take the ferry across to Philadelphia. He had recreated his childhood situation because he spent his late childhood and youth in Brooklyn, when it was a relatively small settlement on the East River, and he became a pet when he was a little urchin of the men who ran the ferry, and so he would ride back and forth to Manhattan. So in his old age, he did the same thing, only he crossed the Delaware instead. And of course, the birthplace we just discussed, I am considered to be an asset in both places.
And you are.
And then I'm available for whoever wants or needs a Walt Whitman.
Very good. Would you like to read something for us?
Yes, I would. Some people, I think, who have preceded me have read their own poetry. I got the looks, Walt got the talent. So I prefer to read Walt. Spring is was a period in Walt's life that had a mixed significance. It was sad because a man he came to greatly love and admire, and whom he saw very frequently on the streets of Washington during the Civil War. President Lincoln was assassinated in April, and Walt celebrated his birthdays, of course, May 31st. And his most famous poem about the death of Lincoln, which was written right after Lincoln was assassinated, Walt spoke to, for, and from the common people, the blue-collar people of his time, which is why he was so completely dedicated to the idea of democracy, because he knew that for the class from which he sprang, that democracy was their only avenue to a richer, fuller life. So he wrote, "O Captain, My Captain," and he came to loathe it, because wherever he went, that's what they wanted him to. It was very much like the garden party. Do you know that?
Sure.
And very similar situation thing. Well, anyway, he would have to do it, but he would do it grudgingly. But his masterpiece, in which he made a magnificent effort to convey his sorrow, was in a section of a later edition of Leaves of Grass, Memories of President Lincoln, and it is When Lilacs Last That the Dooryard Bloomed. And if you visit his birthplace, and I recommend that you do so because there's a fine museum and they have a great many activities there, as well as the old house that I visited so many years ago, you will find lilac bushes by the door, just as they were there when I was there in 1939. He does not mention Lincoln's name. At the time of Lincoln's assassination, Jupiter was just going down each evening over the horizon, and it was big and bright. And he used that and other symbols. He spoke of the train that bore Lincoln's body from Washington to Baltimore to Philadelphia to New York, and then Buffalo, and then west to Springfield, where he was buried. And this is his paean of sorrow. When lilacs last at the dooryard bloomed, and the great star early dropped in the western sky in the night, I mourn and yet shall mourn with ever-returning spring. Ever-returning spring, surely you bring lilacs blooming. I can't see very well.
I know, I keep
need
seeing
some
very
light.
dark there. I'll
Yeah.
give you some light.
I'm sorry to mess up such a
quite all
beautiful
right.
poem.
That is quite all right.
However, at 82, there you go.
There we go.
Now,
Daylight in the studio.
let there be light.
Now let's begin again.
I'm going to start again. When lilacs last that the dooryard bloomed, and the great star early dropped in the western sky in the night, I mourned and yet shall mourn with ever-returning spring. Ever-returning spring, surely you bring lilac blooming perennial, and drooping star in the west, and thought of him I love. O powerful western fallen star, O shades of night, O moody, tearful night, O great star disappeared, O the black murk that hides the star, O cruel hands that hold me powerless, O helpless soul of me, O harsh surrounding cloud that will not free my soul. In the dooryard, fronting an old farmhouse, near the whitewashed paling, stands the lilac bush, tall growing, with heart-shaped leaves of rich green, with many a pointed blossom rising delicate, with a perfume strong I love. With every leaf a miracle, and from this bush in the dooryard, with delicate blossoms and heart-shaped leaves of rich green, a sprig with its flower I break. In the swamp, in secluded recesses, a shy and hidden bird is warbling a song. Solitary the thrush, the hermit, withdrawn to himself, avoiding the settlements, sings by himself a song. Song of the bleeding throat, death's outlet song of life. For well, dear brother, I know, if thou wast not granted to sing, thou wouldst surely die. Over the land, the breast of the spring, amid cities, amid lanes, and through old woods, where lately the violets peeped from the ground, spotting the gray debris, amid grass in the fields on each side of the lanes, passing the endless grass, passing the yellow-speared wheat, every grain from its shroud in the dark brown fields uprisen, passing the apple blows of white and pink in the orchards, carrying a corpse to where it shall rest in the grave. Night and day journeys a corpse. Coffin that passes through lanes and streets, through day and night, with the great cloud darkening the land, with the pomp of the in-looped flags, with the cities draped in black, with the show of the states themselves as of crape-veiled women standing, with processions long and winding and the flambeaux of the night, with the countless torches lit and the silent sea of faces and the unbared heads, with the waiting depot, the arriving coffin, the somber faces with dirges through the night, with 1,000 voices rising strong and solemn, with all the mournful voices of the dirges poured round the coffin, the dim-lit churches and the shuddering organs, where amid these you journey, with the tolling bells' perpetual clang. Here, coffin that slowly passes, I give you my sprig of lilac. Now, the poem is much longer, but I think that is the essence of it. There's another interesting poem, a section called The Sleepers, and it is about the disappearance from Long Island, or most of the disappearance from Long Island, of the Indians who had lived here when Walt was young, and he knew some of the Indians as a child. You know, he was born in a slave state. He was born in New York, and New York was a slave state until 1828, when he was 9 years old. Mm-hmm. Now, what my mother told me one day as we sat at dinner together, of when she was a nearly grown girl living home with her parents on the old homestead. A red squaw came one breakfast time to the old homestead. On her back she carried a bundle of rushes for rush-bottoming chairs, her hair straight, shiny, coarse, black, profuse, half enveloped her face. Her step was free and elastic, and her voice sounded exquisitely as she spoke. My mother looked in delight and amazement at the stranger. She looked at the freshness of her tall-born face and full and pliant limbs. The more she looked upon her, the more she loved her. Never before had she seen such wonderful beauty and purity. She made her sit on a bench by the jamb of the fireplace and cooked food for her. She had no work to give her, but she gave her remembrance and fondness. The red squaw stayed all the forenoon, and toward the middle of the afternoon she went away. Oh, my mother was loath to have her go away. All the week she thought of her and watched for her many a month. She remembered her many a winter and many a summer, but the red squaw never came, nor was heard of there again. Walt did something interesting. He wrote his epitaph and his farewell to the world when he was 34 years old. It was the period in which he was writing the first edition of Leaves of Grass, which was a total departure from anything he had ever written before. Walt grew up on Long Island as a poor boy, living first in Huntington until he was 4, and then his father lost the family farm because the system of primogeniture in England, which meant that the oldest son got everything, and his brothers and sisters had to depend on his generosity, meant that the land remained undivided. But here, in America, even before the Revolution, the custom changed, and the land was divided among all of the sons, usually with equal parts. And what happens then is that the portions get smaller and smaller with each generation, and eventually the land isn't sufficient to support a family, and that's exactly what happened to Walt's father. His father was an excellent carpenter, and one of those unfortunate men who was probably very bright, but who had no opportunity for an education. He got sort of an education because as a young boy, he was a companion of an old alcoholic, Thomas Paine, who had written the pamphlets that Washington believed, and a great many other people and historians since, believed saved the Revolution. So he spent time with Paine in his last years, and he was unfortunately, unlike Walt, who had very little education. He went to school about 5 years, but he was an autodidact. That meant he taught himself, and his father became, probably drank too much and became morose and mean. Walt then took over the role of his younger siblings of the kind father. Anyway, to get back to his farewell to the world, at the age of 34, when he had about another 40 years to live, he wrote the following. But it would have been appropriate if he had read it, or it had become known to the world on the day he died, which was on the 26th of February 1892. My father was 3.5 years old when Walt died. I always like to think about them being contemporaries, albeit for a short time. And here's what he said. Who has done his day's work, and who will soonest be through with his supper? Who wishes to walk with me? Will you speak before I am gone? Will you prove already too late? The spotted hawk sweeps by and accuses me. He complains of my gab and my loitering. I, too, am not a bit tamed. I, too, am untranslatable. I sound my barbaric yawp over the roofs of the world. The last scud of day holds back for me. It flings my likeness after the rest, and true as any on the shadowed wiles, it coaxes me to the vapor and the dusk. I depart as air, I shake my white locks at the runaway sun. I effuse my flesh in eddies, and drift it in lacy jags. I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. You will hardly know who I am or what I mean, but I shall be good health to you nevertheless, and filter and fiber your blood. Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged. Missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere waiting for you.
Wonderful.
Yes, there is hardly anything that Whitman ever did that does not seem to me miraculous. And so I like to be surprised, and Walt always surprises you. He's never hidebound, he's never commonplace. Here's an optimistic note. Do I have time to?
Sure.
Okay. This is a small part of a long poem called Song of the Open Road. Afoot and light-hearted, I take to the open road, healthy, free, the world before me, the long brown path before me, leading wherever I choose. Henceforth I ask not good fortune, I myself am good fortune. Henceforth I whimper no more, postpone no more, need nothing. Strong and content I travel the open road. The earth, that is sufficient. I do not want the constellations any nearer, I know that they are very well where they are. I know they suffice for those who belong to them. Still here I carry my old delicious burdens. I carry them, men and women. I carry them wherever I go. I swear it is impossible for me to get rid of them. I am filled with them, and I will fill them in return.
Darrel, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and it keeps me young just to be able to read Walt's wonderful poetry.
Walt is exactly that. He is perpetual youth and the wonder of experience in life.
Thank you.
Thank you, Darrel.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
All right, well, that's
Mark,
wonderful.
we have a couple of minutes left here, and how would you like to wrap this up?
Well, we could give away a couple of books if people want to call in.
I'm all for that. What are we going to give away? A copy of Primal
Yeah,
Sanities?
a copy of Primal Sanities.
Fantastic. We'll do
Tribute
that as we
to-
go off. Would you
tribute
like
to Whitman.
to head out with something just briefly? Or
Yeah, hey, talk for a second. I left the book over there. Hang on.
Yeah, this is, of course, our annual Whitman birthday celebration, something we're always happy to do, something we enjoy doing. Long Island's own Walt Whitman. And those of you who are not familiar with Whitman, as Darrel just reminded us, you can head right out to the Whitman birthplace. It's right here on Long Island, just in West Hills. You can just, check it out online. Just Google it, Walt Whitman birthplace. You'll get the website. You'll be able to get right there. They always have cool events, poetry events, cultural events, all kinds of things.
All right, thanks, Finn. Thanks for having us all again. We have a wonderful time doing this.
Oh, and it's my pleasure.
And like Darrel was saying, Whitman always surprises. And I don't know if this is officially his shortest poem, but I think it's surely one of them. It's 3 lines. It's not a haiku, but it's. We heard a lot today of that long, rambling, winded stuff that Whitman's known for, and yet here again he shows another side of himself. So that's why I want to finish up with this poem. It's called "Here the Frailest Leaves of Me." Here the frailest leaves of me, and yet my strongest lasting. Here I shade and hide my thoughts. I myself do not expose them, and yet they expose me more than all my other poems. So you have to think about what he's saying, but it's just something, there's a sensitivity that says there's more to, it's like the yin and the yang. There's the body boldness, and then there's that hidden that Whitman Also says, too, when the last bit that Darrel read a song on myself, when he says, you may not know what I mean, but,
Exactly.
I'm doing these things, and it's not just me, it's the cosmos.
And
Well,
he also suggests that you read him more than once, because in doing that, it will suddenly come to you.
Light bulb.
layers and meaning.
Yeah.
We'd like to thank Mankh and Barbara and Mindy and Kempton and Chris and, of course, Darrel for joining us this evening on The Revolution, celebrating the life of Walt Whitman. I think we're going to give away a couple of copies of the book, Primal Sanities, book edited by Mankh and Mr. Wallace, and just a fine, fine book. 631-632-6901 will get you a copy of Primal Sanities, tribute to Walt Whitman. 631-632-6901. 631-632-6901. Get you a copy of Primal Sanities. Please give us a call and pick up a copy of the book, courtesy of Mankh and WUSB Stony Brook. Michael's up next with the Tuesday night rock and roll dance party. I think we're going to go out maybe with Joe Strummer's most pastoral tune right here. And until next week, just remember, don't do anything I wouldn't do. See ya.